Hi, everyone. Welcome to Summer EBT, Looking Back and Looking Ahead, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time, please use the Q&A panel. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, please click the CC button in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. With that, I'll pass it off to Kelsey Boone, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Kelsey.
Thanks so much, Steve. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to have this webinar and talk a lot about Summer EBT, both implementation in 2024 as well as in 2025 looking ahead. Next slide. So just a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to start with some introductions and a brief overview, and then we will go straight into hearing from our panelists. We're going to start with best practices from 2024, hearing from our friends in Illinois. We will then be going into leveraging partnerships in Summer EBT implementation, where we will hear from both the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, Cherry Tomaski, and then as well as Cody Bloomfield from New York Hunger Solutions. And then we will go into planning for 2025 implementation with Gina Cornea from Utahns Against Hunger. And we will end with a Q&A session. Next slide. So just a brief landscape of Summer EBT for 2025. As most of you know, in 2024, 37 states, 2 ITOs, and all territories participated in the Summer EBT program. In 2025, as of now, we know 38 states, as well as 2 ITOs, as well as the territories, are planning on participating in the Summer EBT program. Tennessee had participated in 2024, but is not participating in 2025. And the states of Alabama and Utah have opted in for 2025, which is very exciting after not participating in 2024. Next slide. I also wanted to touch on some brief reminders. The technology grants for Summer EBT are available for state agencies. That is $1.1 million in unmatched funds, so the state does not need to match that money. They are only available if a state submits their notice of intent by the deadline of January 1st, which we will talk about some of those deadlines. But if a state submits their notice of intent, they have until January 15th to submit an application for a technology grant for the summer of 2025. So as I already touched on some of these deadlines, but January 1st, states do need to submit their notice of intents to USDA. By January 15th, if a state has not applied for a technology grant, this is the final deadline to do so, and it can only be done if they have met that January 1st deadline. And then February 15th is when states must submit their plans of operation and management for 2025. Next slide. Just a quick list of Summer EBT resources from FRAC. So we have a guide to eligibility. We have a website that has information for families as well as advocates, and state-by-state fact sheets, which we are in the process of updating. We should have, for states that have not opted in, those state-by-state fact sheets should be updated by early next week. Just a reminder that, all of these resources are available on our website, and these slides will be sent out so you can have access to those links. Next slide. I will now hand it over to, I believe Casey is on from Illinois.
Sorry, you caught me getting coffee. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we're good. Okay. In Illinois, so as far as best practices, I've probably talked to a lot of you before. I feel like we're a little community by this point, but in Illinois, one of the best things we did with 24-25 from my standpoint, and I guess I should level set you real quick. For 23-24, can you tell I just got out of a design meeting for the next school year? For 23-24, we had our partners at the Illinois State Board of Education, our schools. They took the summer EBT only applications and identified their streamlined, and then Department of Human Services, that's me, the SNAP agency, we took care of the establishing of the cases, the matching, and the administration of the benefits and the customer service side once they were done. So for this year of summer EBT, the first year, we piggybacked on some of our PEBT principles, and we really took a lot of time and effort to improve our matching process between the two systems. And so to me, that was one of the biggest wins that was well worth our effort. We had over a 92% match. So for reference, ISB sent us probably just under 1 million children, and we were able to match over 92% of them to children already known in our system. So that not only prevents duplicate assistance, but by matching them, we found through PEBT that our statewide information system for the schools didn't always have the most current address. So by matching them, we were able to leverage information we knew in our Department of Human Services system, which is more likely to have the up-to-date address because we use it for so much. And so we had a hierarchy and we had rules, and we would use our address whenever it was available. And so it's hard to measure, like, how good was that? Was that worth it? But I can say, like, even yesterday, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog. Yesterday we looked at the drawdown rate. So, like, are people spending the benefits? Because to me, that's the biggest telltale sign. Like, are the benefits getting to where they need to go? Well, if they're using them and they're actually spending them, we must have had a good address or a good communication somewhere. And we were at almost 85% of summer EBT benefits that we've issued, which was over $152 million to more than 1.2 million kids. They've spent 85% of it to date. So I was ecstatic to see that, because I honestly didn't think we were going to be that high, especially with the first round. So if you experienced undeliverable or had a lot of duplicate assistance or issues of that nature in the past years, I do highly recommend digging into your individual matching process. And then Roxanne, I know for this year, we are going to move the summer EBT application process. We discussed it internally, and our agency is more equipped to handle application processing, income verification, and use to customer service. So we're going to move that application over to us at the SNAP side. So that's exciting. Is there anything else you wanted to add from the school perspective, Roxanne?
I don't see Roxanne on our panelist list, so yeah, I believe Casey, if that's all you've got, move
Yep.
on.
Yeah, and I didn't want to bore you guys, so that's my quick overview and my biggest point of that was worth the effort. And additionally, our screener, we did an online screener where people could self-serve, and we would just say, yep, your kid's good. We don't need anything more from you, or we don't find your kid. Here's a link to the summer EBT application. I think that really helped with customer service as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next slide, Steve. I will now pass it over to Sherry and Cody.
Great. Hi. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here today. My name is Sherry Tomaski, and I am a SNAP Bureau Chief at the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. Our bureau is responsible for administering the Summer EBT program for the state of New York, and we partner with our New York State Education Agency, who is the partnering agency and provides the data that's necessary to identify eligible children for the program. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about the work that we did here in New York State from the state level and some of the ways that we partnered with our organizations that do child nutrition advocacy across the state and some of the specific ways that we worked together to increase awareness about Summer EBT and to refine and improve some of our messaging and our outreach strategies as a result of our partnerships. But just a little bit of background about Summer EBT in New York State. We just recently issued what we think may be our final round of benefits, and we have paid over 2 million children a Summer EBT benefit in 2024. Totaling $245 million in benefits. And, just to follow the former speaker in terms of how much of that benefit has been redeemed, we do track that as well. As of right now, we're looking at about 70% of all benefits have been redeemed in New York State. But again, there was a fair amount issued just within the last few weeks that haven't been redeemed yet. So that brings our average down a little bit. But overall, we've seen very robust redemption for Summer EBT benefits in New York State. So here in New York, we launched our program a little bit later than the initial timeline that the federal government set forth. We issued our first round of benefits at the end of July for 2024, and we're eager to work towards issuing those benefits before school is out in 2025. But in 2024, as the lead up to issuing those benefits, and of course, building a program from scratch with not a whole lot of time, we relied very heavily on organizations that have networks of partners across the state to help spread the word and help amplify the messaging that we were doing. So some of the ways that we did that in New York are as follows. I think one of the most important and successful strategies was how the advocacy partners organized and hosted webinars, which gave our state agency a platform to present the overview of the program, how it would work, what's different about it from PEBT, and how families should be coming to understand this benefit program for themselves this year. And that was important because it took an enormous amount of organizing off of our plate when we were really focused on program operations. And we also didn't really have the kinds of relationships out into the community organizations that our advocacy partners did. So with their help and support, they were able to organize webinars. We were able to just prepare the presentation and show up. And in one case, I think we had 300 or 400 participants on one webinar in particular. And I also thought that it was very helpful that the partners did organize webinars for specific types of audiences. So for example, there were webinars with sort of the heads of academic and education organizations and child nutrition groups, just for sort of a small group, more detailed presentation. And then we did a broader presentation for any community-based organization that wanted to attend, which gave sort of a higher level and a more general description of the program. So we use those webinars a little differently and a little more strategically in certain situations. We also worked with another organization, Share Our Strength, to do webinars for elected officials. And that also was a new thing for our state agency and a strategy that we thought proved very successful in this first year to help spread the word and raise awareness about how the program would work. One of the other sort of outcomes of doing these webinars is that they were recorded, and it gave us as a state agency a resource that we could then share around to help not only additional external partners, but our own agency staff, really understand the program. And so it was a terrific resource to have that recording. We made that available on our state website and in emails that we sent out to organizations and partners. And we felt that that was a really valuable tool to help continue to educate people about how the programs would work. And we really hope that in 2025, we can leverage the strategy more, and that we also could, do more of these with different audiences as we lead up to summer 2025. Another way that we worked with our advocacy partners was we would meet regularly, and early on it was maybe every month, and now it's probably more quarterly, where they would bring us very specific questions that they would receive from education associations or other types of groups that help families access benefit programs. They would take those questions in, they would sort of synthesize and organize them and try to prioritize what seemed to be the most pressing and bring those questions to us so that we could not only provide clarification or answers to them, but we could also use those questions to help us refine our own messaging. It helped us as a state agency learn where the confusion or the misunderstanding might be in the information that we were putting out on our website and in our family education materials. So that proved to be a very valuable back and forth. Rather than just sort of fielding questions from all sorts of groups, we had a funnel, and that was effective. It was efficient time-wise, but it also gave us very specific and discrete questions that we could answer and then update our own messaging as a result. We also worked with our advocacy partners to distribute materials throughout the state to different organizations and agencies that would be helping families, and also to reinforce these materials with schools. And while the New York State Education Department did distribute outreach materials to the schools, sometimes those don't always trickle down to the staff that are interacting with families through their meal programs. And so this was another important way to get those materials in the hands of, for example, all of the school nutrition professionals or folks from principals or superintendent associations. It was really important that those materials got as far and wide as possible in a very short period of time. So we really relied a lot on our providers to get that information out as much as possible. And speaking of schools, schools tend to have very specific types of questions about the program. And the New York State Education Agency, as our partner, could troubleshoot some of those questions as it related to the data and the technical side of the data submission, but they were not as able to answer questions about when families could expect benefits or how to troubleshoot a problem with an EBT card. Those are the kinds of things that our agency had to do. And so we definitely relied a lot on the groups like Hunger Solutions New York, who works very closely with schools, to make sure that schools were equipped with more technical information about how the program operated for families so that they could pass that information along as well. Another thing that I think Cody will mention shortly is some surveying that some of the partners did around Summer EBT. In New York State, Hunger Solutions also holds a contract to do SNAP outreach and education for families. And of course, those families with school-age children were eligible for Summer EBT. So that provided a perfect opportunity for those nutrition outreach and education coordinators to collect survey data themselves, and also to talk to families about their experience with Summer EBT. And Hunger Solutions has been very effective in coordinating that information back into some specific and aggregate data for us to look at about, again, where families may have encountered issues in 2024 that we could really work hard at trying to mitigate in 2025. That really helps reveal, issues with address integrity and how we deliver benefits to families who may have moved since the last address update with their school, or children who are experiencing homelessness, and so on. So those are the more difficult types of families to serve, and we certainly rely on the input from some of those SNAP outreach workers to guide our work. And then finally, I do think that Hunger Solutions and Share Our Strength and many other public-facing organizations did an excellent job of amplifying our public messaging. So, for example, when we were issuing benefits, they helped, spread the word more publicly that benefits were starting to go out. And now that we're beginning to see benefit expiration around this 4-month mark, they've also been very helpful at making the information specifically available around when benefits are expiring and how families can learn when they need to use their benefits by before they lose them. So overall, I don't see how we could have had the program that we did this year without the help and support of our child nutrition advocacy partners. And I feel like we really only scratched the surface in 2024. And there's a lot of ways that we could do even more with partners going forward in 2025. And as we, as a state agency, get our feet under us more and get our 2025 program requirements in place, we're really looking forward to doing more with our partners in spreading the word about Summer EBT and making sure that every eligible family receives and knows how to use their benefits. So with that, let me turn it over to Cody.
Thank you so much, Sherry. That was such a great presentation. So thank you for having us as well, Kelsey. Really appreciate the invite to present today. My name is Cody Bloomfield, and I am the Summer Nutrition Specialist at Hunger Solutions New York. And we're a statewide nonprofit dedicated to alleviating hunger for all New Yorkers. We focus our work on expanding access to federal nutrition programs, including SNAP, WIC, CACFP, school meals, and summer nutrition programs. A significant amount of the work we do is focused on SNAP outreach and advocacy. So as Sherry mentioned, we have a long-standing relationship with our partners at New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, or OTDA for short, who both administer SNAP and Summer EBT. And as Sherry also mentioned, we hold that statewide contract through OTDA to help connect eligible New Yorkers to SNAP. And we were really delighted to have the opportunity to work closely with New York Summer EBT administering agency in 2024. As Summer EBT was in its first year of implementation, there was a real need for clarity around program basics, such as who would be eligible for the program, how it differed from pandemic EBT, who needed to apply, and who did not. We were also really concerned with ensuring that parents and caregivers were aware of the program and understood who could receive benefits. In regard to outreach, our goal was to work in lockstep with our state agency to help ensure families received clear and accurate information about Summer EBT, and to also help families understand how they could reach the state agency if they had specific questions about their children's benefits. The number one way we achieved this goal was to leverage existing relationships. As I mentioned when I introduced myself, we work across all the federal nutrition assistance programs. And because we work on so many programs, we hold relationships with a variety of stakeholders. These stakeholders have been important partners in our Summer EBT work, and they've often taken on the role of advocate themselves. A few examples of key partners in our Summer EBT work include the New York State School Nutrition Association, our statewide education groups like superintendents and principals, and also our close summer meal partners like our State Library Association and regional summer meals collaboratives. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but it does illustrate how we've been able to draw on our existing partnerships to effectively spread the word about Summer EBT statewide. And we've cultivated these partnerships over time. This didn't happen overnight. And we continue to build these relationships by tabling and presenting at the annual conferences for these stakeholder groups. And this ensures that we have at least one in-person touch point every year with these groups. Our consistency has really helped build our reputation as a trusted partner. Sherry already mentioned many of the ways that we worked together this past summer, whether we were hosting webinars on behalf of the administering agency or disseminating outreach. Leveraging our existing network of relationships greatly increased the efficacy of our reach. And as a trusted partner, we're also well positioned to capture commonly asked questions from community-based organizations, schools, and individuals enrolled in SNAP. This type of information helped our organization better understand the facilitators, the barriers regarding Summer EBT. And thanks to our relationship with our state agency, we have ongoing opportunities to share constructive feedback from communities throughout New York State. I myself have only been in my role for a few years now, but I really had the privilege of working closely with several state agencies, and I've seen how hard the staff are willing to work to expand the reach of these programs. But state agencies are often juggling many competing priorities, which can slow down these efforts. And with the quick rollout of Summer EBT, I know it was challenging to stand up this program so swiftly. Now more than ever, I'm aware of the critical role advocates play in supporting state agencies by helping to increase public awareness of Summer EBT. As anti-hunger advocates, we worked to add capacity in this regard while the state agency stood up the program. And I'll come back to the example of hosting the Summer EBT webinar that Sherry mentioned. The webinar was largely attended by community-based organizations and schools, and our role was quite literally creating the space for the conversation. And since it was hosted virtually, it was an incredibly light lift on our part. It mostly necessitated creating a registration link and disseminating the information to our networks. So it wasn't too much of a lift at all. But the webinar itself was a presentation by the state agency on the rollout of Summer EBT in New York with time for open discussion. This partnership really allowed the state agency to simply show up and present on the webinar while continuing to focus most of their resources on implementation. Sherry mentioned this example as well. It's just such a great opportunity for folks to support each other and lighten the load when they can. As mentioned in the introduction I gave of our organization, Hunger Solutions New York manages a statewide network of SNAP application assisters called the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, or NOAP for short. And these SNAP application assisters work directly with individuals to help them apply and or recertify for benefits. They also frequently field questions about other benefits that individuals may be eligible for, such as Summer EBT. Sherry also mentioned this in her presentation. We're currently surveying these SNAP application assisters to help us learn more about Summer EBT from their perspective, and to also hear feedback they received from SNAP recipients with regard to Summer EBT. In this survey, we're also asking about Summer EBT outreach and how outreach efforts can be improved in Summer 2025 and beyond. That's a particularly interesting piece that we're trying to capture and improve for the next year and moving forward. Because of the regular meetings we hold with our Summer EBT state agency, we were able to incorporate their questions into the survey as well. So for me, really the biggest takeaway here is that if you're connected to any groups that do SNAP outreach or application assistance in your state, these could be really strategic partners with regard to Summer EBT. I'll also mention quickly that we created a specific Summer EBT page on our website that features program basics, links to OTDA or the administering agency's webpage, and then also the phone numbers for the appropriate Summer EBT customer service helplines. And we really took care to make sure this page was mobile friendly, so that banners were appropriately placed for mobile users and that information was really clear and easy to access. That we also made sure to state clearly the most up-to-date information with regard to issuance timelines. This was really one of the most frequently asked questions. We just wanted that information up front and center for anyone visiting the webpage. I really had the privilege to see that when state agencies and advocacy organizations work well together, the federal programs are more effective and their reach is expanded. And we're really grateful to FRAC for leading by example and inviting us to present alongside our state agency today. I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions that folks may have, and I'll pop my email in the chat. But thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much to our presenters from New York. And if you have any questions for any of our speakers so far, please put them in the Q&A function, and we will get to all questions at the end. Right now, I'm going to hand it over to Gina.
There we go. You'd think after so long I would remember to unmute myself. Thank you. I really appreciate being here today, and it's been really great to hear about other states' experiences and how Utahns Against Hunger can incorporate those things into our upcoming implementation. So really, the first thing that we need to do in Utah, last year in our state legislative session 2024, Summer EBT was the governor's main priority for our SNAP agency. So our SNAP agency has really been leading out on this. Our Department of Education has been supportive, but they have not taken the lead. They have a new child nutrition director. I'm not really sure exactly what that sequence of events was, but they were not eager to participate. I think that a lot of the data issues, and they felt like it was just this huge lift for their child nutrition division. So the Department of Workforce Services has really taken the lead and worked with the governor's office to submit a letter of intent to participate. And so in 2024, we went into the session with funding for summer EBT as the #1 priority for the governor's office for that department. And we really trusted that it was being handled. We have a super Republican majority in both in the House and the Senate. And sometimes if we push things too hard, they will, just because they're contrary, will deprioritize that. So our funding for our summer EBT got prioritized very high. We thought going into the end of the session that there was not going to be an issue, but they only funded it for one time coming up into summer 2025. So in our legislative session coming up, we will again be advocating for ongoing funding. The governor's budget comes out today, but we anticipate that it will also be his #1 priority for the Department of Workforce Services. So sort of to as some insurance, we have been working with Representative Clancy, who is working on our Healthy School Meals for All legislation. And we are putting language in that bill to implement summer EBT. So we are hoping that by not only having it be the priority for the governor, it being in this piece of legislation, that we will be able to get ongoing funding beyond 2025, especially since it is taking so much to, as you all know, to prop up this program. Over the summer, we have had a number of informational webinars. We are working with the American Heart Association, Get Healthy Utah, and the Policy Project, as far as advocates go. And we've had some public events where we are working on Healthy School Meals for All, implementing summer EBT, and cell phones in schools. So this package, I mean, it's on the same legislation, but the Policy Project is talking about all of those things. And so it's bringing together some folks who normally wouldn't work together and giving us all an opportunity to push forward on summer EBT. We're also, after the first of the year, after the holidays, we'll be meeting with our SNAP agency to start talking about testing for the application that they're developing. We'll also be bringing together the coalition that we worked with for summer EBT to make sure that we are thinking about all of those elements that you all have already dealt with and implemented. We worked with folks from the Pacific Islander community, from the Spanish and the immigrant and refugee communities. When we did summer EBT, we translated information into 11 different languages, and we anticipate that we'll be translating information into at least that many languages, at least target the ones with the highest need. We'll also be working with a new organization. As many of you know, folks from the Marshallese Islands are now eligible for SNAP upon arrival. And that's a new relationship that we have, that we've been working with the Utah Marshallese Association to make sure that we are reaching all of those folks who maybe haven't accessed benefits before and maybe just have bad information or, word of mouth information that they're not eligible. So we'll be working with that coalition to make sure that we have as far a reach as possible. One of the things that we have a question about, the data issue, and I would love to hear from folks about how to do that data match. I mean, that has been, from our school side, the biggest challenge. The Department of Workforce Services has done a really great job in reaching those who are directly eligible, but making sure that we get that application out as far and wide as possible. And I'm really excited to use some of the ideas that I've learned here today in terms of implementation and lessons learned. It's really valuable to hear about that stuff. And I'm also happy to answer any questions that folks have.
As far as okay.
Thank you so much, Gina. All right, we will now turn to the Q&A portion of our presentation. And we have had a few questions come through in the chat. Feel free to use the Q&A function to send your questions. I do want to quickly just clarify some of the deadline pieces that I had mentioned at the beginning. So yes, January 1st is the deadline for the notice of intent, which is sent to USDA. The January 15th deadline is just the application for the technology grant. So that is separate from your plan of operation and management, which is due on February 15th. So just to clarify, the January 1st deadline is notice of intent. Your plan of operation and management for your actual plan and budget narrative pieces aren't due until February 15th. The January 15th deadline is for that technology grant. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So the first question we have is for Casey. When you talk about data matching, would you be able to explain, walk us through what that process was like from getting the funds from USDA and we're getting the data from your schools and from your organization through the families getting funds, like what the data matching process was like?
Yeah. So I'm sure all of us, right? All the states have some sort of like individual database. And when you get applications in, you try to determine if you already have that individual in your system. So what we experience through PEBT is that oftentimes the schools don't, in Illinois, do not collect social security number. And so all we had was name, date of birth, and sometimes an address, whether it be current or not, and not even all the time. So what we found was that if we tried to use our regular matching criteria, we weren't matching because they go by, Tom at school, and that's what the school has him as, but he's Thomas in my system. And we didn't have that unique identifier, such as a social security number that really helps you figure out who your people are and match them. So we knew after going through PEBT and then having Summer EBT where you had those two overlapping streamlined people, because the direct cert kids that were known in my system are streamlined eligible, and that the schools would be sending me back all my streamlined kids. And up to this point, we didn't store a unique identifier between the schools and our DHS. So the first thing I did was, with all the PEBT kids, I had been storing their student ID that our schools use. And so I did an analysis and matching of all of those PEBT kids against the children in my system and said, okay, let me try and see. And if I loosened up the match. So we didn't do exact. And then what we actually did was we took name, first name, last name, and I feel like I'm going in the weeds. I'll try to keep this brief. First name, last name, date of birth, and address. Those are like 4 criteria, right? I took that and said, okay, let's do some analysis on kids I know from PEBT. And we did different variations. And what it ended up coming to was that if we could match on 3 of the 4, it was the same kid. We had like 100% success rate because we did like 14 categories. And because I went down to zip code on some of them to see when did we start getting errors? Because as soon as we got errors, I was going to kick it out and not let it match. But we found that we could go pretty deep and it would be the same kid and we would match. So did that cleanup first. That informed my matching process to loosen it to match students. But then also, once I did that with the kids I knew, I stored their student ID to my kid so that when the schools sent me their kids, they sent me their student ID. And if I already had the ID, I was good. And we had the solid match. And so that really helped us. It got us to do it. And it let me know the kids I don't know. So like to outreach points, right? These families are under 186% of the FPL. Why don't I know them? We do Medicaid up to like 300 and some odd percentage in Illinois. So we've got a group of like 80,000 kids that we're, preparing outreach material to. Did I answer that? I am a detail person, so I don't want to go too far in the weeds for you.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. The next question is for Cody. What advice would you give an advocacy organization that's just beginning to build a relationship with their state agency? What initial steps would you suggest they take?
This is such a good question. I would say starting small, so building trust with the agency, not being discouraged also. So if you can get regular meetings on the schedule, that's a great way to build a rapport. But if you can just get one per quarter or one per year, even wherever you can starting is the key, making sure that, like I mentioned, this building trust piece. So staying in lockstep with their messaging, supporting the work that they are already doing in the ways that you can. I mentioned in my presentation about how we hosted the webinar and how easy of a lift that was for us, but how it freed up some space for OTDA, our administering agency, to focus on implementation. So finding ways where you're not recreating the wheel, where you're not making duplicative efforts. It's really about, I'm not a huge fan of aphorisms, but like work smarter, not harder, right? So I feel like those would be some of my biggest tips, but I'm sure I can think of more. So if you want to reach out to me at my email address, I'd be happy to talk more about that. We are really lucky to have the relationships we have with our state agencies, and they've been built over many years. So these relationships didn't happen overnight. The trust wasn't built overnight. So slow and steady, again, another aphorism. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Next question is for Sherry. What additional support would be helpful from national advocacy partners moving forward?
Thanks for that question. I tried to think about this a little bit, waiting for the question to come up. We did work with some national partners in a couple of different ways. So I'll give you a few examples of what worked, and then just sort of what I think is helpful from a state agency perspective. So I think for national organizations that have a presence in the state, they could do things that are very similar to what a state-based organization could do to support the program rollout in their state. So in New York, some national organizations would include information about New York's program in their newsletters. They would send out, email blasts just to their New York audience, and tailor that information to to what's specific about our state. We have our own application, we had our own website, our timeline for issuing benefits was a little different. And we wanted to make sure that all those nuances were clear and that they weren't sort of diluted in a national message. And so national groups, I think, were able to put a little bit of extra effort into trying to communicate just with their New York audience. Another example that came to mind is we did work with Propel, who runs the app for EBT transactions, and they have been very, very good at thinking about ways to connect to their users in our state with very specific information about the program in New York. And they got, for example, detail from us about when our benefits were going out and how to reach our customer service. And they were able to put that on the banner just for New York users. And they also, I think, included some New Yorkers in some of the surveying they did. So we were able to look at survey results specific to people in our state as well. So just from a messaging and a customer service perspective, I think some national groups did a really nice job of that. Another example that came to mind, Hunger Free America, which happens to be based in New York State, but is a national organization. They took on through their own volition, they took on a role of helping people in the community who needed to fill out an application and didn't have the, all of the information or were struggling with how to do so. So they offered application assistance at a local level. We were able to troubleshoot some questions for them, but they just voluntarily did that on their own with some funding that they received from a foundation. And, that to me was one of the pieces that we didn't really have the capacity to fill at the state level, was sort of locally based application assistance. So that I thought filled a really helpful role for our program in 2024, especially in New York City, where I think a lot of families, really needed some help understanding whether or not the application was for them. So that was just another example. And then, just more broadly, I mean, I think that national groups have a presence with the, with USDA and with members of Congress, and can be maybe helpful liaisons with information sharing or amplifying, maybe some of the challenges that states might be facing, or maybe some opportunities for what might help with program administration in the future. So I do think some organizations can really be effective messengers in that way, helping to amplify, what some of those local concerns might be from a state. So I think that's sort of unique from organization to organization, but those are just some of the ways that national groups stepped in and gave some support to New York.
Thanks, Sherry. I think this next question is also for you. So, did New York see an increase in participation in general summer meal programs, both congregate and rural non-congregate, from the awareness building around summer EBT?
I'm going to let Cody speak to that because she probably knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer this. Hi, Beth. So we haven't gotten a good look at the numbers yet for participation data in 2024 for this past summer. So I can't really speak to the correlation in this moment. But I love that you brought this question up, because I think it ties into something that we've tried really hard to do at Hunger Solutions New York, which is to tie these programs together. Summer meals participation doesn't mean that you can't participate in summer EBT and vice versa. We're really trying to do coordinated outreach about the programs together and present them as like a suite of summer nutrition programs that support families while school's out of session. So it's just important to highlight that. I think if anything, the outreach that we did at the summer meals sites most likely helped more with summer EBT awareness than the other way around, if that makes sense for this past summer. But that was such a great question. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you. Sherry, did you want to chime in?
I just want to, completely off topic, I just want to make sure that folks saw the message in the chat from Emily from USDA. I just want to make sure that folks understand that there's a set of deadlines related to the technology grant and a set of deadlines related to operating your state program in general. And so the slides sort of combine deadlines for each of those two different things. And so I just want to make sure that folks understand that the January 1st deadline is to submit your plan of intent to operate a program. And that's required in order to apply for the technology grant. But it's not an intent to apply for the technology grant. It's an intent to operate a program. And then the last technology grant deadline is the 15th of January. And it's 60 days from that date that the plan for the technology grant is due, which is different than your state's POM, which is due February 15th. So if you can keep this all straight, kudos to you. But I just wanted to make sure that folks saw Emily's note. And seriously, your USDA regional office is your number one resource on all of this. They will make sure that every state is meeting their deadlines that they need to meet. And I highly encourage to make sure that you've got their phone number on speed dial.
I really appreciate you highlighting that. Thank you so much. I have one more question for Gina. So you had mentioned joining forces with a bunch of different stakeholders that you wouldn't usually be most interested in, this program in particular, to kind of push forward some legislation. So if a group was in a red leading state as well and wanted to kind of gain traction for this program, is there any advice that you would give a group that is trying to push this forward?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yes. So, um, I had run across a message on a business Facebook page of a guy who sort of randomly started a foundation to pay off school meal debt. And so I reached out to him, and that sort of started this ripple effect with our technology folks here with it's called Silicon Slopes. And so via this guy who started this foundation, we were able to get in touch with these technology Silicon Slopes folks, and they are now supporting our efforts. I would say, you know, like if you are a person who, you know, isn't afraid to talk to people or isn't afraid to reach out to people, I would just reach out to if you know, you can find out who the lobbyist is, or the legislative liaison for any of those industry groups that you would like support from, reaching out to them. They have been very responsive to us and are very interested in making sure that we not only expand access to school meals, but that we are offering summer EBT. So I would say, get over whatever sense of, you know, shyness that you might have, and reach out to people.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, that is the end of our questions. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. And thank you for all the wonderful questions and engagement. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of their week.
Great. Thank you
Thank you,
so
everybody.
much.